Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the bridge of the UES Sanctuary, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she studied the holographic display of the Centauri sector. Red warning indicators pulsed across the map, marking the positions of the Vorkath fleet. They were getting bolder, pushing deeper into human space with each passing cycle. "Admiral, we're picking up an emergency beacon," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his fingers dancing across the control panel. "It's from New Haven Colony." Chen's jaw tightened. New Haven was supposed to be a secret, a sanctuary world where they'd been protecting thousands of refugees from worlds already lost to the Vorkath invasion. "Show me." The hologram shifted, zooming in on a small agricultural world. The beacon's signal pulsed weakly, broadcasting on an old frequency that made Chen's heart sink. It was coming from one of the underground shelters. "Major Walsh," Chen called out to her security chief, "prepare a rescue team. Full tactical loadout. But remember, this is a sanctuary operation." The Vorkath ships appeared suddenly, dropping out of hyperspace like obsidian daggers cutting through silk. Their angular vessels dwarfed the sanctuary, bristling with weapons that could reduce a planet to ash. "Unknown vessels," a harsh voice crackled through the comm system. "You are harboring fugitives from Vorkath justice. Surrender them immediately." Chen activated the ship-wide comm. "All hands, battle stations. Sanctuary protocols are now in effect." She turned to her bridge crew, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "They think we're protecting these people because we're weak. They're about to learn what real strength looks like." The first shots came from the Vorkath flagship, purple-tinged energy beams that the sanctuary's shields barely deflected. Chen's ship responded with precision strikes, not to destroy but to disable. They needed to buy time. "Admiral," Rodriguez called out, "ground team reports the shelter is secure. 237 survivors, mostly children." A massive Vorkath warrior appeared on the main screen, his scaled face contorted in what passed for disgust among his kind. "You protect the weak," he spat. "You waste resources defending those who cannot contribute to victory." Chen stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of human history. "We protect them because that's what makes us strong. Every child we save is a future we're fighting for. You see burden. We see potential." The Vorkath commander's yellow eyes narrowed. "You cannot win this way." "We already have," Chen replied, as the tactical display showed the rescue shuttles lifting off from New Haven's surface. "Because while you've been focused on our ships, our people have been evacuating the very ones you came to capture. We didn't come here to fight you. We came here to save them." The alien's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "You would risk your largest warship, your best warriors, for children." "Every time," Chen answered without hesitation, "because that's what humanity does. We protect our own, and we protect those who cannot protect themselves. It's not weakness, Commander. It's the strongest force in the universe." The rescue shuttles docked safely, their precious cargo secured. Chen ordered a strategic withdrawal, leaving the Vorkath commander to contemplate a type of victory he had never considered before, one measured not in destruction, but in lives saved. As the sanctuary jumped to hyperspace, Chen visited the ship's newly established shelter deck. Hundreds of children from a dozen worlds looked up at her with tired but hopeful eyes. Among them, she noticed a small group of Vorkath younglings rescued from the fighting on their own worlds when their warriors had abandoned them as tactically inefficient. "Welcome aboard the sanctuary," she told them all, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. "Here, we measure strength not by how hard we can fight, but by how much we can protect. That's the lesson humanity learned long ago, and it's one we'll never forget." The ship's AI dimmed the lights to simulate night, and as the children settled into sleep, Shen returned to the bridge. The war wasn't over. It was far from it. But today, they had won something more valuable than any battle. They had shown the Vorkath a different kind of strength, one that might just change the course of this conflict. And somewhere out there, She knew a Vorkath commander was beginning to question everything he had been taught about power, weakness, and the true meaning of victory. First Warrior Kextol stood in the observation chamber of his flagship, the Eternal Vigor, watching recordings from the recent encounter with the human vessel. His claws clicked against the metallic floor as he replayed the sequence, showing the human ship protecting the refugee transports. Fascinating, isn't it? The voice belonged to Dr. Mira Patel, the human cynoanthropologist who had been captured during a previous skirmish. Now she served as an advisor, though many of Kextol's officers viewed her presence as a sign of weakness. "Your kind continues to confound us," Kextol admitted, his inner eyelids flickering. "You could have destroyed 3 of our ships in that engagement. Instead, you focused solely on protection." Mira stepped closer to the display, her dark eyes reflecting the holographic battle. "That's because you're looking at it through Vorkath eyes. You see missed opportunities for victory. We see lives saved. Lives that drain resources," Kextol countered, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Children require protection, feeding, education, all resources that could be directed toward the war effort. May I show you something?" Mira asked, pulling up data on her authorized terminal. "These are efficiency reports from human colonies that have integrated refugee populations." Kextol studied the figures, his head tilting in confusion. "These cannot be accurate. Productivity increases, innovation spikes, in settlements burdened with offspring." "Not burdened," Mira corrected gently. "Motivated. Every parent working in those colonies knows exactly what they're fighting for. Every child we protect becomes someone who remembers that protection, who grows up understanding the value of compassion and community." The ship's alert system interrupted their discussion. "First Warrior, we've detected unusual energy signatures from the 3rd moon of Helios Prime, the mining colony we conquered last cycle." Kextol's frills extended in surprise. "It should be abandoned." "Should be," Mira echoed, "but humans are remarkably good at hiding when we need to." Kextol ordered an immediate investigation, leading a personal expedition to the moon's surface. What they found beneath the ruins of the mining facility stopped even the hardened Vorkath warrior in his tracks. A vast underground complex stretched through the ancient lava tubes, converted into a self-sustaining habitat. But unlike the military bunker he'd expected, this was something else entirely. Classrooms filled with children of various species, hydroponic gardens tended by teenagers, medical facilities where young ones learned basic care. "Welcome to what you'd call a tactical inefficiency," Mira said softly, watching Kextol's reaction. "We call it hope." A small human child, no more than 6 standard years, approached the imposing Vorkath warrior. Instead of fear, her eyes showed curiosity. "Are you here to learn too?" she asked, holding up a digital tablet displaying mathematical equations. Kextol looked to his warriors, then back to the child. His training demanded he view this as a military target. His instincts told him something very different. "You teach them everything?" he asked Mira. "Everything we can," she confirmed. "Science, art, medicine, engineering, even the youngest ones. Because we learned long ago that knowledge preserved is more powerful than any weapon." A young Vorkath emerged from one of the classrooms, wearing the same simple clothing as the human children. Kextol recognized the markings. This was a child from one of the inefficient broods his people had abandoned. Yet here it was, thriving, learning alongside species that should have been enemies. "Your Admiral Chen," Kextol said slowly. She spoke of measuring strength differently. "I begin to understand." Mira nodded. Every child here represents a future where conflict isn't the only answer, where strength can mean protecting instead of destroying, where different species can learn from each other instead of fighting each other. The ship's sensors detected approaching Vorkath warships, hardliners who wouldn't understand what Kextol now saw. He made a decision that would change the course of the war. "Signal the fleet," he ordered his second. "This facility is to be marked as a protected zone under my direct authority." He turned to Mira, his expression solemn. "I request permission to learn more about your methods." Mira smiled. "Lesson 1. That's exactly the kind of strength we've been talking about." As Kextol's warriors integrated into the facility's security teams, something unprecedented began to take shape. A Vorkath warrior caste member choosing to protect rather than conquer, learning alongside the very beings he had once dismissed as weak. The war wasn't over, but in the classrooms and corridors of this hidden sanctuary, its end was being written by children who saw no enemies, only fellow students. And perhaps that, Kextol realized, was the greatest victory of all. The emergency alert shattered the relative peace of the underground sanctuary on Helios Prime. Through the reinforced viewing ports, First Warrior Kextol watched as the sky turned purple with the distinctive engine flares of approaching Vorkath warships. But these weren't his allies. Supreme Commander Vorkath's personal fleet, his second-in-command, reported grimly. "They're not responding to recognition codes." Dr. Mira Patel's fingers flew across the command console, initiating emergency protocols she hoped they'd never need. "How long until the UES sanctuary can arrive?" "Too long," Kextol growled, his warriors' instincts already calculating odds of survival. "They'll breach our defenses within the hour." Through the facility's corridors, children of multiple species moved with practiced efficiency, following evacuation protocols they'd drilled countless times. There was no panic, no chaos, just the determined focus that came from understanding exactly what was at stake. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. Supreme Commander Vorkath's scared face filled the main screen, his expression a mask of disgust. "First Warrior Kextol," the Supreme Commander's voice dripped with contempt, "you dishonor the Vorkath with this aberration. Protecting the weak, teaching our discarded young alongside aliens. This ends today." Kextol stepped forward, his stance proud despite the implicit threat. "With respect, Supreme Commander, you haven't seen what I've seen. These children are a corruption of everything we stand for." Vorkath cut him off. "Your human pet has poisoned your mind with their weak philosophies. Surrender the facility, and your death will be quick." Mira watched as Kextol's frills darkened, a sign of deep emotion among his people. "No," the First Warrior replied simply. "No." Vorkath's yellow eyes widened in genuine shock. "I have learned something here that you cannot understand yet," Kextol continued. "True strength isn't measured in ships or weapons. It's measured in what we choose to protect." The transmission cut off abruptly. Moments later, the first bombardment began. The sanctuary's shields held initially, their power reinforced by technologies developed by the very children the Vorkath had once discarded. In the command center, Kextol and Mira coordinated a desperate defense while evacuation ships began launching through concealed tunnels. "They're targeting the escape vectors," Mira reported, her voice tight with concern. "They knew our protocols." Kextol's expression hardened. "Then we give them something else to target." He turned to his warriors, who stood ready despite knowing they faced their own kind. "Prepare my personal shuttle. We'll draw their fire." "Kextol, that's suicide," Mira protested. The Vorkath warrior's inner eyelids flickered in what she'd learned was amusement, perhaps. "But I begin to understand why humans are so willing to sacrifice for others. It gives purpose to death, and meaning to life." As Kextol's shuttle launched, drawing the attention of the attacking fleet, something unexpected happened. Other Vorkath ships, ones that had been watching, learning, and questioning, began to break formation. Not to attack, but to protect. In the sanctuary below, a young Vorkath student named Lexity worked alongside her human and alien classmates, rerouting power to maintain the shields. She had been one of the inefficient ones, abandoned by her brood. Now she demonstrated exactly what that efficiency rating had missed: creativity, adaptability, and an unwavering determination to protect her newfound family. The battle above turned into chaos as more Vorkath ships chose sides. Verkath's certainty and absolute victory crumbled as he watched his own warriors turn against him, choosing to protect the very weakness he despised. Admiral Chen's task force will arrive in 17 minutes, the tactical officer reported. If we can hold until then. A massive explosion rocked the facility. In the medical bay, human doctors worked alongside Vorkath healers, treating the injured without discrimination. In the engineering section, children who had once been enemies worked together to maintain critical systems. Through it all, Kextel's shuttle danced through enemy fire, drawing attention away from the precious cargo escaping below. His tactics weren't those of a warrior seeking glory and death, but of a protector willing to risk everything for something greater than himself. This is what they fear, Mira realized, watching the battle unfold. Not our weapons or our ships. They fear this moment, when their own people see that there's another way. As the shields began to fail and hope seemed to fade, a new signal lit up the communications array. Admiral Chen's voice, calm and determined, filled the command center. Sanctuary. This is the UES Sanctuary. Hold fast. We're coming to bring our children home. All of them. The war for the future of both species had entered a new phase, and it would be fought not with weapons, but with the very ideals the Vorkath had dismissed as weakness. In the midst of chaos, a new kind of strength was emerging, one that would reshape the galaxy itself. The bridge of the UES Sanctuary hummed with tension as Admiral Chen watched the tactical display. Her fleet had arrived just in time to witness something unprecedented. Vorkath warriors fighting their own kind to protect a sanctuary of children. Multiple Vorkath vessels are broadcasting surrender signals, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with disbelief. They're requesting permission to assist with evacuation efforts. Chen shared a knowing look with First Warrior Kextel, whose battered shuttle had just docked in their main bay. Grant them access to our defensive network. Today, we're all on the same side. Supreme Commander Verkath's voice crackled through the comm system, rage evident even through the static. You corrupt everything you touch, humans. Our warriors turn soft, protecting worthless offspring instead of fighting for victory. You still don't understand, Kextel responded, his voice carrying the weight of his transformation. I've seen these children, human, Vorkath, and others, build things we never imagined. They don't think about old hatreds. They see possibilities we're too blind to recognize. In the sanctuary below, Dr. Mira Patel worked alongside her former captors, now allies, coordinating the emergency response. Young Lexti, the Vorkath student who had once been deemed inefficient, had devised a way to extend the facility's failing shields using principles she'd learned in her physics classes. The shield modifications are holding, Lexti reported, her scaled fingers dancing across the control panel. But we're detecting structural damage in sections 3 through 7. Mira watched as human and Vorkath children worked together, moving supplies, helping the wounded, and maintaining critical systems. This is what they fear most, she said to no one in particular. Not our weapons, but our ability to change their minds. Above the moon's surface, the battle took an unexpected turn. Verkath's forces, facing resistance from their own kind, began targeting the rebel Vorkath ships with particular fury. The Supreme Commander's voice boomed across all channels. Those who betray our ways will be purged. But something had fundamentally changed. The rebel Vorkath warriors, who had spent weeks watching human children teach their abandoned younglings, who had seen strength expressed through protection rather than destruction, fought with a conviction that surprised even themselves. Admiral Chen ordered her fleet to provide covering fire for the rebel Vorkath ships. We protect our own, she declared, and today that includes them. In the medical bay, a young human doctor named Sarah worked alongside a Vorkath healer, treating wounded from both sides. The Vorkath's precise knowledge of their species' anatomy, combined with human medical techniques, created an efficiency neither side could have achieved alone. I was taught that humans were soft, The Vorkath healer admitted as they stabilized a critical patient, "That your compassion made you weak. But I've never seen anything stronger than the way you fight to save lives." Throughout the facility, similar scenes played out. Vorkath warriors who had once sneered at human weakness now stood guard over evacuation routes, their massive forms providing cover for running children. Human soldiers who had fought the Vorkath for years now fought alongside them, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. Kextol, watching from the sanctuary's bridge, felt something he'd never experienced in all his years of warfare: hope. "We've been measuring strength by how much we can destroy," he said to Chen. "You measure it by how much you can save. The irony is, your way makes us stronger than we ever were before." As if to emphasize his point, a group of children, human and Vorkath together, had rigged an emergency broadcast system, transmitting images of their sanctuary throughout the Vorkath fleet. Warriors who had come to destroy now saw their own abandoned young thriving, learning, and growing stronger through cooperation rather than conflict. "They're pulling back," Rodriguez announced, surprise evident in his voice. "Vorkath's fleet. They're retreating." But Chen and Kextol knew this wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning. The real challenge would be what came next: teaching two species who had defined themselves through conflict to find strength in protection, in nurturing, in building something together. "We'll need to establish more sanctuaries," Chen said, already planning ahead. "Safe places where both our peoples can learn from each other." Kextol nodded, his warrior's heart understanding at last. "Not just sanctuaries," he corrected. "Schools. For all our children. Because that's where true victory begins." The stars above Helios Prime watched silently as something new took shape, not just an alliance, but a fundamental shift in how two species understood the very nature of strength itself. 1 year after the Battle of Helios Prime, the Great Hall of the newly established Concordat Center buzzed with activity. The massive structure, built jointly by human and Vorkath engineers, stood as a testament to what cooperation could achieve. Its transparent dome revealed the stars above, the same stars that had once witnessed only war between their peoples. Admiral Chen stood at the podium, her dress uniform adorned with both human and Vorkath honors. Beside her, First Warrior Kextol's imposing figure drew curious glances from the assembled dignitaries. The sight of a high-ranking Vorkath warrior wearing the insignia of the Joint Protection Fleet still surprised many. "A year ago," Chen began, her voice carrying through the hall, "we stood on opposite sides of a battlefield. Today, we stand together as guardians of a future we're only beginning to understand." The hall's main doors opened, and a procession entered that brought murmurs of amazement from the crowd. Children, human, Vorkath, and from a dozen other species, walked in together, wearing the uniforms of the first graduating class of the Interspecies Education Initiative. Young Lexti, now a teacher herself, led the group. The Vorkath girl who had once been discarded as inefficient now stood tall, her achievements speaking louder than any warrior's battle cry. Behind her, human children walked alongside Vorkath younglings, their differences forgotten in the pursuit of knowledge. Supreme Commander Vorkath called this an aberration. Kextol addressed the assembly, his warrior's voice softened by emotion. He was right, but not in the way he meant. This is an aberration of war, of hatred, of the belief that strength can only be measured in destruction. Dr. Mira Patel, now Director of Interspecies Relations, stepped forward with a data crystal. The results speak for themselves. The combined research teams of our young students have made breakthroughs in medicine, technology, and space travel that neither of our species achieved alone. They don't see boundaries, they see possibilities. The main screen displayed images from the new network of sanctuaries that had sprung up across both human and Vorkath space, places where children learn not just academic subjects, but the true meaning of strength, the strength to protect, to nurture, to build rather than destroy. There are still those who resist, Chen acknowledged, her eyes scanning the crowd. Vorkath's loyalists continue their attacks, But with each passing day, more of their warriors see what we've seen. They watch their abandoned young grow into something extraordinary, and they begin to question everything they were taught about strength and weakness. A small commotion at the back of the hall drew attention. A group of Vorkath warriors, their armor bearing the marks of recent battle, entered slowly. Their leader, a scared veteran, approached the podium with measured steps. "I am Battle Master Raxtel," he announced, his voice carrying years of conflict. "We have fought against this change, but we have also watched, and we can no longer deny what we see." He turned to face the children. "My own brood was deemed inefficient. I abandoned them, as our ways demanded. Today, I learned that my youngest serves aboard a human medical ship, saving lives that I would have once taken without thought." The Battle Master's next gesture shocked even Kextal. He removed his warrior's crest, the symbol of his dedication to the old ways, and placed it on the podium. "We request permission to learn," he said simply. Chen smiled, remembering Kextal's similar words a year ago. "Lesson 1," she replied, "is that permission to learn is something you already have. It's something we all have." As the ceremony continued, Lextai led her fellow students in presenting their latest project, a new type of shield technology that could protect entire colonies, developed by combining Vorkath energy principles with human adaptation theories. But more remarkable than the technology was the sight of former enemies working together, young minds unencumbered by the prejudices of their elders. "This is how we win," Mira whispered to Kextal as they watched the presentation. "Not by defeating our enemies, but by showing them a better way." The Vorkath warrior nodded, his gaze fixed on the future taking shape before them. "We thought we were strong because we could stand alone," he replied. "You showed us we're stronger when we stand together." As the stars wheeled overhead, the great hall of the Concordat Center witnessed something unprecedented, the beginning of a future where strength was measured not in weapons or wars, but in the courage to protect, the wisdom to learn, and the power to change. The children of both species had shown the way. Now it was up to their elders to follow, into a dawn that promised not just peace, but a kind of victory neither side had imagined possible, the victory of understanding over fear, of protection over destruction, of life over death. And in the end, that was the greatest strength of all.